it's like the analogy of a farmer saying, when's the best time to plant a tree? The best time would have been 25 years ago.
Exactly.
10 years ago. If you want to reap the rewards, do it now so that you can reap those rewards when the tree grows. My strategy is always, if you're coming into commercial property for the first time, I always say, make it simple. Let's give you a property that's going to give you the cash flow, that you get to learn how commercial works, because commercial is really understanding business. And if you're not a business person, it's a whole new learning for you. So understand how the commercial property works. Learning about it in courses and online is one thing, but actually getting your feet wet and doing it yourself is something completely different. So we recommend that you jump into a property that is fairly set and forget, easy to understand, gives you that cash flow. The diversification of the portfolio is across the 3 sectors. So always good to make sure that you're hedging your bets. And the 3 sectors are industrial, retail, and office. Okay. And why do I say that? Because all you need to do is just look at history, and history repeats itself. When was it? At the GFC in 2008, you couldn't give industrial properties away. They were plentiful. Now, look at the market today. You can't buy industrial properties anywhere. They're in such short supply.
But the market cycles. You've got to be ready to be ahead of the cycle, or have a bit of vision or bit of guidance, or to see what's coming and see the market. And like you said, often what's not the flavour of today turns out to be the very dish that everyone's after next week.
Absolutely. And if you've got your fingers in all of those pies, just keep them balanced, keep them going, and realistically, you can do any uplift strategy in any of those sectors. Renay, I want to just show a quick case study of purchasing a couple of properties and getting to that. It's just sub 10 million. But in actual fact, we went right over 10 million with this client. This was a property bought in Zilmia. It was purchased for 1.6 million. It had a rental income of 169,140. We did the uplift on the property and we increased the rental income to 184,997. That was the gross annual income. The net income was 116,545, and the uplift took it to 132,402. So the purchase price, it was a bit of a negotiation. We did quite a lot of argy-bargy. It was a 2-month negotiation, and we got this property at 7.28%. After the uplift, the yield went up to 8.28%, and the value of the property went up, get this, to 2.2 million. So it was actually 2.206700 was the value of the property, and this we did in less than 12 months. So, wow, a whopping uplift of over 400,000 on just one property.
And it's important people understand, like, there is a bit of work that goes on here, yes, to get that uplift happening, but you don't have to put in hard yards. You don't have to do, you're not out there doing
batches and toilets.
You're not doing another 3 jobs to make this happen. This is happening on your behalf. It's unearned. It's just increasing for doing nothing but sitting there and you're continuing watching Netflix. I think they get a little bit confused about the capital gain that you can get on properties, and you don't necessarily have to be doing a crazy amount of work. You might have to do some minor things or adjust leases or put in an aircon or whatever, but it's not a stupid amount of work. It's not like you're building another, putting another house on a block of land of residential and the craziness that goes with that in order to get a small increase in your yield. What would you say are like the do's and don'ts of this sort of stuff? Like for you, when you talk about uplift, what are you talking about?
Well, here's a perfect example. The second property was a purchase of 1.725 million. Okay, this again was a tough negotiation, and with a rental income of $127,000. Now, this was a 10% yielding property. However, the do's and don'ts on this property in particular, and most properties, we identified that the problem was with the tenants. that the tenants were disgruntled. The tenants didn't have proper leases. They hadn't been treated very well. So we did very, very little to the property itself, to the bricks and mortar. We didn't have to renovate bathrooms. We didn't have to put in extra kitchens. We just went in there, and it was all about relationship building. It was all about having a look at their leases, getting that they were all on short-term leases. Some of them didn't even have leases. So it's the knowledge of knowing how to do that, of working with the tenants. Some of them wanted to vacate. We went back and had the discussion with them to give them value, add value. And in some cases, they wanted new carpets, or they wanted walls painted, or they wanted air cons, better air cons. And we negotiated with them. We said, sure, we'll give you a new lease. We'll give you your air cons, your painted walls. We'll do the cleanups. There was an issue with some bins and, tidying things up around the property. And by adding 3 plus 3 plus 3 year leases to their rentals, it increased the values tenfold. So by the time the valuer came along and had a look at their property, the bank sees 3 plus 3 year leases. They love that. They're gonna give you lending on that sort of asset any day.
Yeah.
So the net value of the property went up to 3.239 million, bearing in mind we bought it at 1.7. So this client made a chunk of cash out of this property, let alone the valuation that came in right about that price, which meant that he can actually go back to this property, draw down the equity, and do it again. And that's exactly what he did in this case.
That's like a massive misconception, isn't it? Like, there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about commercial real estate.
Completely. I mean, people miss the ball completely. Look, it is difficult to do this stuff, and you need to know what you're doing. It's not just any Joe blogs. If you don't know what you're doing, you could get really, really stung. Tell you a little story about a client of mine that bought a property. It was a $2 million property. Had about 14 tenants. So it was a retail property, and thought, great, happy days. The problem was that most of the tenants were on short-term leases. As the time went on, the tenants were only renewing the leases by 12 months, which meant that the value of the property wouldn't go up by virtue of the fact that she had short-term leases. Now, this is something that you can't do in residential. So very little has to be done to the bricks and mortar and the structure of the property itself. The entire value of that property was on the leases. When she managed to get 3-year leases out of, she got 3-year leases out of 9 of those tenants that were on one-to-ones, the value of the property went up exponentially. And again, that is where she has the opportunity to do an equity drawdown and to go and rinse and repeat.
They don't understand that. They don't understand. Like, in a residential, you can't say, I want to put you on a 5-year lease now. That's not a possibility. It's not allowed. Makes a difference, though, in the eyes of the bank. They go, okay, this is a much more secure investment. And because this is someone's business, this is where they make their money to be able to live, that's, it's another added layer. Well, for me, I feel it's another added layer of protection, because they've got a vested interest in maintaining that property. They've got a vested interest in presenting it properly, customer service, making it somewhere to do business that people enjoy and want to keep coming back. But, you didn't have the oddball that's doesn't quite think like that, but they're few and far between, because this is someone's livelihood. So, their livelihood, they will not usually, sacrifice that in any way. So I think when in residential, if they don't like the pool or they don't like whatever and they can't change it, they just move. They don't sign for 5 years. And that's another thing that I love about commercial too. That industrial shed, could very well one day turn into a medical suite, just due to the location and the natural, changing or gentrification of an area, that we've seen that happen. So that doesn't often happen in residential. You don't, very, very rarely do you see a house turn into a medical suite. So, I love the commercial, how it can start off as one story or one particular type of building, and it can turn into so many others. But that's very difficult to do in residential.
Renay, I mean, we could talk about the speed of growing your portfolio.
Yeah.
Okay. And we touched on it earlier, where the client had 18 residential properties over a period of 15 years versus buying 4 commercial properties in just under 2 years and adding tremendous value, having a $10 million portfolio. It was $10 million plus portfolio, and to rinse and repeat, to do this again and again. It most certainly is a fast way and a slow way. And look, I always start clients off on a slightly slower way, like I said, just to stick your feet in and get used to it. But if you've got the grit and you understand real estate, hell, go the fast way. There might be a little bit more risk involved and a lot of trust. And you've got to understand this is the kind of thing that we've been doing for years. I started doing this at the age of 22 years old. It's the first thing that I learned about real estate is how to make an existing building better. You know, my father was a builder. He was an architect. And as a little girl, I was hanging out with him when he went out to buildings, and he used to show me this stuff all the time. So my apprenticeship is thank you, Dad. So we have another case study. This was a property that was purchased at $1.25 million. It had a net income of $174,000 and a little bit of change. It was a cleanup. It was a lease renewal. It was adding value by giving tenants certainty. Now, so you've got to understand something. When I'm talking about adding value and offering a tenant a 3+3+3 term on their lease, the value is to the tenant, not the landlord. So in other words, if the landlord wants to get rid of their tenant, it's going to be very difficult. So it's giving the tenant certainty that they have got the premise for the next 3 to 9 years at their option. So the option is theirs. It's their choice. Now, there are a couple of things about this, because in this case study in particular, we had a couple of tenants that were selling their businesses, and they wanted to run their lease out to sell their business. When we sat down with them, we said, hey, if you're selling your business, put your feet in somebody else's shoes. If they come along and they want to buy the business, wouldn't it be better for them if they had certainty and security around the fact that the landlord's not going to kick them out? Yeah. The best thing to do is to sign a 5-year lease. Give them that certainty. And that's exactly what happened in this case, where we got the existing tenants to sign longer term leases. And as a result, we had a massive uplift. And this property was reevaluated at $3.4 million. So it went from 1.250 to 3.4 million. That is a massive uplift. And that is a true example of working smartly with your tenant, with your building, and knowing how to do this in order to create that uplift. It's kind of like knowing how to do the do's and don'ts. I think most certainly the don'ts are to walk into a property with a lot of ego and start throwing your weight around with the tenants, because they most certainly are not going to like that. Bearing in mind that you need to realize that when you're buying a commercial property, one of the biggest fear factors is the tenant, who's going to say, oh, what are they buying the property for? Are they going to throw me out? Okay. So one of the first things you want to do is to go in and make friends with your tenant, find out about them, engage with them, how their business is doing. Okay. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is shake the tree, make too many changes. You want to show the tenant that you want to work with them, that you want them to thrive, and you want to assist them for their businesses to thrive. It's like buying a commercial business. It's like buying any business. If you go in there and you make massive changes straight away, everybody's going to be very unsettled. They're going to be very nervous about it. So slowly, baby steps, work with one person at a time, adding that value.
It's important to know what the tenant wants too. Like, I've often seen landlords go, well, I'm just going to put in new toilets. When in actually fact, the tenants don't want new toilets. They want an awning out the front because they want to, extend their eating area. So I think it's much better to go in and build a rapport and relationship with the tenants, so you know what it is they want. So don't cost yourself a fortune in doing new toilets when the reality is they don't care about the toilet. They want an awning in order to expand their business and do a better turnover, which makes them, a better tenant. They're going to stay there longer. They're going to be more invested. So that's definitely a wise do there. Make friends, not enemies, and get to know them and their businesses and what they want. And if you have a good property manager, they will definitely be doing that on your behalf. But if you don't, I agree. Don't go in with ego. Go in and tread lightly and get to know who are these people building and the life that they have.